when the temperatures plunged below -40, and Soviet artillery echoed through the frozen forests of Finland in the brutal winter of 1939. Most armies would have been swallowed by the cold, frozen, immobilized, and erased. But the Finnish soldiers did something extraordinary. They didn't just survive the cold, they weaponized it. They adapted to an environment so harsh that metal shattered, engines seized, and unprepared men froze to death within hours. And while the world remembers their tactics, their skis, their speed, their courage, what most history books overlook is a quiet science happening behind the scenes. The Finns weren't relying on high-tech gear or imported supplies. They built their survival from the land itself, from the trees, from the animals, from the chemistry written into the landscape they knew better than anyone else. Tree sap and reindeer fat, two of the simplest, most humble materials on Earth, became the secret foundation of a fieldcraft so effective it bordered on alchemy. This wasn't wilderness romanticism. It was necessity crystallized into practical science. And the more you study it, the more astonishing it becomes. The Finnish soldier didn't just fight the winter war with rifles and skis. He fought it with chemistry natural. Chemistry applied with a precision born of centuries, spent living alongside forest and snow. To understand how they endured is to gain a glimpse into some of the most ingenious, overlooked survival methods in modern history. Tree sap, thick as syrup and sticky even in bitter cold, became their multi-tool one that held their weapons, their equipment, and sometimes their bodies together. Pine and spruce resin was everywhere along the front, and the Finns knew exactly what to do with it. Melded gently over a tiny fire, it flowed like warm glue, ready to seal cracks in rifle stocks, waterproof boots that were splitting in the cold, or patched the canvas of a pack worn thin from weeks in the forest. When mixed with charcoal dust from the previous night's fire, it hardened into a tough, tar-like coating strong enough to mend cooking tins or shield knife blades from rust. Resin didn't freeze. Resin didn't rot. Resin was dependable nature's epoxy. But sap wasn't just for gear. It was medicine. In a war where medical supplies were often days away, sap became a natural antiseptic. A soldier could heat it until it thinned, drip it over a cut, and watch as it hardened into a clean, protective shell. The wound stayed sealed and dry. Infection slowed. Healing began. The same compounds that helped a tree seal its wounds were now keeping soldiers alive. A forest's biology had become a battlefield bandage, and the brilliance of it, anyone can replicate it even today. Pine resin, equal parts resin and fat, or wax, creates a waterproof, antibacterial dressing almost identical to what those soldiers relied on for months with no supply lines at all. That's field chemistry. That's adaptation. That's survival. But resin alone wouldn't have saved them. Not in that cold. Not when the human body is burning through energy just to keep from freezing solid. For that, the Finns turned to something even more primal. Fat. Reindeer fat and calorie-rich tallow that provided slow-burning energy no carbohydrate could match. A single spoonful of rendered fat could keep a man moving longer than a full meal of bread or porridge. It was fuel in its purest form. Soldiers carried it in pouches or tins, sometimes mixed with crushed bark or oats to stretch it further. When melted with a bit of resin or beeswax, it became an emergency fire start enough to coax flame from damp tinder in the middle of a snowstorm. Rubbed onto leather or skin, it protected against frostbite, keeping boots supple and preventing the cracking that could cripple a man in winter warfare. That same principle holds today. Rendered fat is one of the most versatile forms of natural fuel in existence. Melt it, strain it, store it. Suddenly, you have food, fire starter, waterproofing, and skin protection all in one. The Finns had no margin for error, so nothing they carried served just one purpose. But the real magic of their survival happened when these ingredients were combined. 1 part sap, 2 parts fat melted together, stirred, and left to cool. The result was a flexible, waxy sealant that rivaled industrial coatings. It patched clothing, kept water out of canteens, sealed seams in boots, coated tools to prevent frostbite, and even preserved food. Spread thinly over dried meat or bread, it created a protective barrier that extended shelf life for weeks. It clung to metal without cracking, remained pliable in sub-zero temperatures, and resisted both moisture and bacteria. Long before synthetic polymers became common, Finnish soldiers were handcrafting a biodegradable multi-purpose coating right in the middle of a war zone. Each of these discoveries came straight from the forest, from the chemistry of living things. Sap hardened to protect, then softened again with heat. Fat stored energy that didn't freeze. Ash neutralized acids and helped cures form faster. This wasn't just survival. It was an understanding of how the natural world works at a molecular level. And that understanding made the Finnish army nearly impossible to dislodge from its own terrain. Today, these lessons remain incredibly relevant for anyone interested in bushcraft, sustainable living, wilderness survival, or simply the ingenuity of history. The Winter War stands as a master. With nothing but natural materials, the Finns created adhesives, medicines, preservatives, lubricants, fire starters, waterproofing agents, and wound treatments, all biodegradable, renewable, and effective in the most hostile climate imaginable. Learning these skills today means learning to operate anywhere, even when modern gear fails or supply lines disappear. When the Finnish soldiers ran out of supplies, they didn't break, they didn't panic. They turned to knowledge of forests, of biology, of chemistry hidden in nature. The mixture of pine sap and reindeer fat may sound simple, even primitive, but in reality it represents one of the most remarkable examples of human adaptation under pressure. A reminder that technology doesn't always begin in a factory. Sometimes it begins with a handful of sap, a bit of fat, and the will to survive another frozen night. That's why the Winter War remains one of history's clearest lessons. It wasn't just a military conflict. It was a story of chemistry written in snow and fire. A story of how people can thrive when they understand the land they stand on, and how the simplest materials can become lifelines when used with knowledge and intention. If this kind of deep, practical history fascinates you, where science, survival, and human determination intersect, sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this story. Because the more we explore these forgotten skills, the more we understand that survival never depended on gear alone. It depended on knowledge. It depended on imagination. And sometimes it depended on a little sap and a little fat in the cold.